morning, students. I'm here with Mr. Bovill, and he is a poetry writer. And we're going to ask him some questions about what his writing process is for his poetry. So, thank you, Mr. Bovill, for joining us today.
Thank you for inviting me. And go Baltimore Ravens and go Coastal Carolina.
Of course, he had to put that in there. Okay, so Mr. Bovill, when did you start writing?
The first poem I ever wrote was I was in BI, and I remember just being in there for something silly I did. I don't even remember what it was. And I was just so angry about being in BI. And I was angry a lot at that time. And I just remember feeling confined. Like, when I was in BI, they had the cubby holes that you
Right.
sit in and you see all the drawings and stuff that people put in there. And then I was just like, you know what? I got to get this frustration out. So that's the first time I ever wrote a poem. And I think it was ninth or 10th grade.
What was the name of it? Do you
Confined.
remember? Confined.
And it was something like sitting in this room feeling all confined, about to lose my mind. It was crazy, but I felt so much better after writing it.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
That's cool. So, where does your ideas and inspiration for your poetry come from?
My ideas, honestly, it comes from the primary source is my pain. Like a lot of my friends growing up, when things happen to them, a lot of my friends as we started getting older in middle school and high school, they would drink or they would smoke or they would do different things like that to relieve their pain or their stress. Or for me, it was writing. And when I wrote that poem when I was in, BI, I felt so much better after relieving. I felt like relieving all the built up anger I had, built up frustration. And so when I feel really passionate about something, whether it's I'm really happy, I'm really sad, I'm really excited, if I'm really mad and I just want to fight somebody, I'll write a poem about it. To the point now where I might just write about it in general. And that's where a majority of my, so I write what I feel. No matter what it is, if I'm happy, excited, I feel creative, I want to tell a really cool story in my poetry, I write what I feel. So whatever my strong feelings are that I have to get out, that's what I'll usually focus my writing on.
So, instead of acting out
Mm-hmm.
your feelings and your frustrations, you're writing them down to kind
Right.
of get them out of your head and off of you.
And it works. I mean, it helps a lot. You have these feelings, and sometimes you either want to express them to somebody else, or which is also good, or you might want to just act out. Me, I wrote like, and not saying I was a perfect kid because I was far from it. If you have my class, I've told you some stories, but for me, a lot of times that works a lot because when I have that built up, whether it's anxiety or sadness or happiness, it feels so much better when I can release it.
Right. Well, what is your like revision process like when you write? Do you have a way that you revise your work, or do you sit it down and come back to it, or how do you do that?
Yeah, so for me, it's a few things. One, I have to once I write it, I have to read it out loud.
Cool.
Because that allowed me to hear how it sounds.
Mm-hmm.
That's a big thing. I always have to get at least two or three proofreaders. I didn't pay attention a lot in first, second grade, and it shows. So I'll get Miss Bovill to read over it. I'll send it to one of my friends who she's a grammar expert to look over it, and then once again I have to read it out loud because I want to hear how it sounds. And a lot of times you can catch a lot of your grammar mistakes if you read it out loud.
So, kids, that is a great strategy to have is to be able to read your work out loud before you turn it in. That way you catch all of your mistakes or words that you omitted that you can add words back into it.
Yeah.
So, good strategy. So do you keep like any drafts or samples that you've marked up and, that you maybe set aside and you don't like the way it sounds this time, but you might come back to it later and add to it. So do you keep a notebook or?
Yes. So my notebook has transitioned to my phone, And a backstory, really quick. I used to have a notebook, a composition book that I kept with me, and then I lost it. And when I lost it, I lost all of my poems. And if you know anybody who writes a lot of poems, that's like that's the worst thing ever because those are very, like I said, I write what I feel. So there are times where, I wrote about my grandmother's death and my mom, overcoming her addiction, all those things, and I lost it. So what I started doing was, and I still do it now, I remember all of my poems.
Oh, wow.
I'll study them, and probably as I'm getting older, hair loss coming and age, I don't remember as many, but I probably still have about 20 poems, pretty long poems, memorized in my head because that fear of losing them. So, but now also I keep in my phone and I back it up like 100 times to my Dropbox, my OneDrive. But I keep my journal, and there's some poems that I've been working on for like 2 years.
Wow.
And it's because I always like to try to force myself to think of a different perspective when I'm telling a story. Just different topics. I always like to consider different, like how would this person respond to it, and how would this person. So there's some poems I've been working on for years.
So you consider when you're writing the reader that's
Mm-hmm.
going to be reading your poems, and you write to that to make sure that that reader's going to understand where
Right.
you're coming from.
Right, right. And that's a big thing for me is because, there's a balance with it because I want to write what I feel, but I also want the person that's reading it to truly understand the intent of my message.
And to take something away from it.
Right.
Because that's, I'm sure that you want people to take away something
Yeah.
from your poetry
Yeah.
so that they can become stronger and build on the positive parts of their lives
Right.
as well by reading your poetry.
Right. That's a very, very true. Very true.
Cool. So how long does it typically take you to write a poem? You said something about it. You got some that's taking you 2 years to write.
So there's some poems, most recently I wrote a poem about it was called the White Lincoln with the Blue Door.
Oh, cool.
And it was a story about my grandmother. And that poem, I was sitting outside, this was recently, and once again, I write what I feel. And I was just reflecting on my grandmother's life and how inspiring she was to me. And I started to not get sad, but I started thinking about her a lot. And I was so into it, I finished that poem in like 30 minutes.
Wow.
Going back, some things are harder to write, some things are easier. Some things I want to make sure I tell the story the right way. So there's a different poem I wrote about my grandmother, and that poem probably took me 3.5 years to write because I would stop it, I would think about, okay, how would because obviously it's a sensitive subject, what I was talking about. So I had to consider what would my aunts feel about it, what would my mom, what would my grandmother's sister think about it, so I wanted to be sensitive to all of the different types of audiences. And so that poem took me a while.
Wow.
It took me a very long time to write. There's a poem I wrote about my son that actually I'm still back and forth changing some things, and I haven't shared it with anybody. But that poem, I've been working on that. My son's 6, and
Wow.
So technically 6 years. Because I don't know why. I think by the time I finish it, he might be 50 years old. It'd be a little too late, right, to give him the poem in.
Well, have you published any of your poems?
So I haven't, and this is news to the students. Some of them in my class I've shared it. March the 3rd is what we're looking at. I will be publishing a book.
Oh, okay.
And the book is called The Right Way to Heal. And for a while, my mom is a published author, and she's been pushing me to publish my poetry. And I've never wanted to write a book of poetry. I always wanted to use my poetry to tell a story.
Okay.
So my best friend and I, we went to college together. Coastal Carolina, okay, Coastal Carolina.
He's got to get those plugs.
Right. We went to college together. We were roommates, and he's a very creative storyteller as well.
Okay.
And I've been talking with him about this idea. I want to use this poetry that I've had since I was in 10th grade, and I want to tell a story with it. And so we created a book, and it's called The Right Way to Heal. And the right is spelled like the word right, the
Okay.
right way to heal, and it follows this kid named Deion Sanders. And ironically enough, Deion Sanders is he's not an athlete, and that's the irony of why we named him that.
Oh.
And everybody, when they first meet Deion, they think he's an athlete, and they'll ask him, and he have to explain, no, my mom just like Deion Sanders, but I'm not an athlete. He's a poet. And throughout the book, I'm not sure if you ever heard of the book Monster.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you know how throughout the book he'll write in his journal.
Mhm.
It's very similar to that.
Okay.
And it's telling the story of Deion and his three best friends. So I'm really excited about it.
Cool.
Like, March 3rd is when we're looking at releasing it.
Okay. So basically for sale on Amazon, I'm sure.
Yep.
Cool.
Yeah, we hopefully it'll be everywhere.
Okay.
You know, that's
Well,
our
we'll be-
fingers crossed.
Yeah, we'll be
So.
looking for that in my free copy, right?
Amen.
So what do you consider your best work and why?
I think my best work is I think my best work, and I'm not just saying it because the book is coming out. I would say it's the book.
Okay.
Is because once again, me and this my friend, we've been working on this book since 2013,
Wow.
off and on.
Mhm.
You know, just playing with the idea, playing with the characters, trying to match our schedules, and to be able to take some of my most personal poems that I've ever wrote or written and put them into a complete story and tell a story of these fictional characters and create their lives. And
Mhm.
it's been, I mean, so rewarding. Like, poetry for me was really, really, really therapeutic, but this book has been like both therapeutic and addicted. Because it's like, man, this is a whole,
That's a good word.
you know,
Yeah.
you read a book and it can take you to a whole new world, and it's great. But when you're writing a book, it's like you get to create the world.
Yeah.
It's so cool. I mean, I don't know. I think that might be right now. I feel like my best work because it has a lot of our work in there as well. And Rodriguez, who's the co-author, the story element of it, he created like 90% of it, and he's such a great storyteller.
Mhm.
And he used the poems to create this story and pieces of our lives that are in there, and it was
That is
just
so cool.
yeah, I'm really excited about it.
So now that you know that this book's coming out, do you feel almost like, oh my God, I don't have anything to do, or are you already starting to think about something else that you can do, or what are your next
Yeah.
steps after this?
So we've already been talking about how can we take and expand on these characters to create books around
Oh, cool, like sequels
like
almost.
right because one of my favorite books growing up was Tears of a Tiger.
Yeah, I have them
And
here.
right, I know you do.
Yeah.
But just something along those lines that because one of the characters in the book, his name is Mickey.
Mhm.
I didn't say this, but we're also releasing a hip hop album with the book,
Cool.
and one of the songs is dedicated to Mickey,
Uh-huh.
who I'm not gonna give anything away. So you all read it. Maybe it might be a class set, but
There you go.
but Mickey reminds me of some of our students who he doesn't have the perfect life at home, but he's such a good kid. And a lot of times just his environment doesn't allow him to show it sometimes, but he's such a good kid. He's so funny, he's so likable, and it remind me of my students. And when I was talking to my co-author and I asked him like, why did you create Mickey? Like, where did this character come from? And he was like, I don't know, man, just reminded me of myself when I was in school, and
Yeah.
so I'm super excited about it.
Cool. I can't wait to be able to read it. I mean, this is going to be cool to know somebody that's an author.
I'm gonna send you the manuscript.
Okay, that would be cool. Do you collaborate? Of course, you just talked about collaborating with your best friend, but do you collaborate with others as well besides him that you've written this book with? Do you like? I don't know, before or after you write something?
Yeah, I like to consider if I, like I always will have at least two people. If I'm writing a poem or whatever I'm writing that's creative, I always have somebody revise it, look at it. Hey, what can I make better about this? To me, that's collaborating because
Right.
I'm using their ideas to make the poem better.
Mm-hmm.
Because I love to tell a story through my poems, So I always, so that essence, me and Miss Bovill actually wrote a poem together last year, and we performed that at a few places.
Cool.
And we both used the pain of something that happened from childhood. Both of our brothers had, really tragic experiences, but they were also very different at the same time. And so we used that both of our experiences with our brothers to tell a story. And that's the last time I've collaborated with somebody on a poem.
Okay, cool. Um, when you, how do you overcome your writer's block? If you have writer's block, what do you do?
So for me, if I have writer's block, I just won't write. I'll take like a 10-minute break or sometimes a day break, especially if it's with the book in that case, and I'll walk away. Um, Sometimes I'll read other creative stuff because then it'll give me ideas about my character. In this case with this book,
Right.
the character I told you about Mickey before, like the book, it was showing him as he was just always in trouble, and I just couldn't figure out how could we make Mickey, how could we bring more creativeness to his character, and I just couldn't figure it out. So I just said, let's not even worry about Mickey for at least the next couple of days.
You move to another character.
We moved to another character, but he moved to another character. I just started reading, like I went back and read Tears of a Tiger and Forged by Fire. Not the whole book, just different parts of it, and it gave me really good ideas. And so we went back and created a whole new chapter for Mickey. So before Mickey was ever introduced in the story, we introduced a chapter called Mickey, and it painted a very vivid picture of, we created a whole background for his character.
Right.
So with me with writer's block, I have to step away from it and then kind of reset or, go find some other writings and get inspiration from it.
It's cool though that you've used other mentor texts to be able to go and look at to figure out where their perspective's coming from to help you build on your writing and what you're doing within your book. It's cool that you do that. So, because there's a lot of good writers out there that you could pull information and stuff from. So, this should be interesting coming from Mr. Bovill. If you could tell your middle school self anything, what would it be? What advice would you give your middle school self?
Ooh, wait. So to be a better middle school student or to be a better adult?
To be a better, both.
Both?
Yeah.
If I could tell my middle school self anything, it would be one. Do not take your shirt off in the hallway and twist it around your head like a helicopter. Cause there's a song when I was in middle school, and it's not a bad song, but it was a song about being from the Carolinas.
Okay.
And everybody loved the song, and it was like, North Carolina, go on and stand up, take your shirt off, twist it around your head like a helicopter. I took it literal, and I took my shirt off in the school, twisted around my head like a helicopter, and I got
the finger.
principal's office. So, but in seriousness, I would say I would appreciate my middle school years more, because so much of middle school and high school was I can't wait to get to high school. Like, oh, high school was I can't wait to become an adult. And then all me and my friends talk about now is, man, I wish we can get those days back in middle school when we were in the cafeteria or we were, goofing off in class and just being with our friends. So if I could give my middle school self any advice, it would be to really, and I tell my students all the time, really appreciate your middle school years, because they're really weird years and everything's changing around you in your life, but it's the years that you really can't get back. And that's the case for any year, but especially those middle school years.
Right. And then what would you, for your, your adult life, what would you, to take into adult life, what would have you told yourself?
For to not chase success or the idea of success.
Okay.
To remember, the things that brought me joy and happiness, and those things can't be purchased, and those things can't be obtained through, amount of success or amount of money you make. It's to really enjoy like the really small things in life. And um, one other thing is to stick to things much more because there are certain things that I believe that I could have accomplished or I could have done, but I didn't force myself to stick with it.
Ah,
So
okay.
those would be the big things.
Well, is there a poem that you have in your head that you could share with us?
I have a lot of poems in my
To end
head.
it?
So one of my favorite ones is so sticking with the theme of sticking with it. One of my favorite poems is a poem called Determination.
Okay.
And it's actually going to be in the book as well. Um, so see if I so under the guilt of this purged sin, I maintain this determination in a nation full of deterred men. See, this anticipation of greatness is amazing when I'm in the face of adversity. Shooting all of these words to your ER emergency. It's an emergency when I speak of greatness with such urgency, urging you to unity towards a bigger purpose like Dr. King in his prime or Malcolm before the dying sea. The determination of a man is embedded in the brain and about chasing the fame to win this game mastered by the women you chase. See, determination should drive you like an intoxicated renegade on I-95 running from that 9 to 5. Let that thought of success consume your last breath because if you want to be successful, as bad as you want to breathe, pay homage to Mr. Thomas, hold your breath and shoot for the stars. Determination is spending all night in that booth spitting out your last tooth. Those teeth don't matter because if you don't grind, then you don't eat. So until then, I'm going to eat this mic and I'm going to eat this book and I'm going to eat this gym floor and I'm going to come back for more like a fiend. I fiend for those conquered dreams of that big white house, no Olympus. Yet my passion is Olympic. Determination is no gimmick. So allow me to mimic Mr. Thomas one more time. If you truly want to be successful, as bad as you want to breathe, pay homage to Mr. Thomas. Hold your breath and shoot for the stars.
Awesome. That was awesome.
I forgot. There was a line I forgot in there. I don't know.
Yeah, but to be able to recite it like that off the top of your head is really cool.
Cause that fear, I lost that notebook, and
Yeah.
some of my favorite poems were in there.
Wow, that is crazy. Well, we appreciate you very much sharing your story with us. Is there anything else you want to add before we sign off?
Yes, be you, and understand the power of reading can take you anywhere, and the power of writing you can create anywhere you want to go. Love you. Go Ravens. Go Coastal. Go Ravens. Go Ravens. Go Ravens. Go Ravens. I'm gonna say it till you turn off the camera. Go Ravens. Go Ravens.